Nobody had ever brought a steel blade to the Galactic Blade Academy. In 3,000 years of training the finest warriors in the galaxy, every cadet had arrived with energy weapons, plasma swords, or quantum-edge blades that hummed with power. So when Rena Okafor walked into the orientation hall, carrying a simple katana made of folded steel, the laughter started before she even reached her seat. She was 24 years old, born in Lagos, Nigeria, and she had traveled farther than any member of her family had ever gone. The blade at her hip was older than space travel itself. Her great-great-grandfather had received it as a gift from a Japanese soldier during the Second World War. For generations of her family had carried it. Now it hung at her side in a hall full of aliens who thought it was a joke. A tall insectoid creature with 4 arms stepped in front of her. His name was Drell Savin, and he belonged to a species called the Kethri. Each of his 4 hands held a different weapon. Plasma blade, photon rapier, ion dagger, quantum cutter. All of them glowed with deadly energy. "Is that real metal?" Drell asked, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Did you dig it out of a museum?" Rena met his compound eyes without flinching. "It belonged to my ancestors." "Your ancestors must have been very poor." The cadets around them laughed. There were hundreds of them, representing dozens of species from across the galaxy. They all carried weapons that could cut through starship hulls. Rena carried a blade that could not even scratch modern armor. She found her assigned seat in the back row, in the section marked for Squad 17. It was the lowest-ranked squad in the academy. The seats around her were filled with other rejects and oddities. A small amphibian creature named Pell sat beside her, trembling with nervousness. He was the only one who did not laugh. "I like your sword," Pell whispered. "It looks old." "It is old," Rena said. "Very old." The orientation ceremony began. Academy officials explained the rules. Each cadet could only use the weapon they registered upon entry. They could not switch to a different weapon for any reason. Rena had registered her katana. She was stuck with it. The Crucible tournament was announced. In 3 months, all first-year cadets would compete in single combat. The loser of each match would be expelled from the academy. There would be no mercy and no second chances. Drell turned around in his seat and pointed at Rena. "I will face you in the first round, human. I will send you back to your primitive planet where you belong." Rena said nothing. She had learned long ago that words were wasted on people who had already decided not to listen. After the ceremony ended, the cadets filed out of the hall. Rena moved toward the exit, but a voice stopped her. "Human, wait." She turned. An old reptilian creature stood behind her. He was tall and covered in faded green scales. His eyes were yellow and ancient. He wore the uniform of a senior instructor, and his name tag read Joel Merak. He was Sarati, a species known for their warriors. According to the Academy records, he was over 400 years old. "Yes, instructor?" Rena asked. Merak did not speak immediately. He stared at her blade with an expression she could not read. His old eyes moved along the length of the scabbard, studying the worn leather wrapping on the handle, the small scratches on the metal fittings. "Draw your weapon," he said. Rena hesitated. Drawing a weapon in the academy halls without permission was against the rules. But Merak was an instructor. His word was law here. She drew the katana in one smooth motion. The steel caught the light and gleamed. It was not flashy like the energy weapons. It did not hum or glow. It was simply metal, forged by human hands over a century ago, folded and hammered until it held an edge that could split a falling hair. Merak leaned closer. His nostrils flared as if he could smell the history in the blade. "Where did you get this weapon, human?" His voice was different now. The mockery she had heard from the other cadets was absent. In its place was something she had not expected to find in this place, so far from home, surrounded by creatures who thought her people were primitive. Respect. "It belonged to my great-great-grandfather," Rena said. "He carried it in a great war on my planet. His children carried it after him. Their children carried it after them. Now I carry it." Merak sitrekten in it. For a long moment, he said nothing. The other cadets had all left. They were alone in the great hall. "Come to my quarters tonight," Merak said. "After the evening meal. Tell no one." "Why?" The old reptile turned and walked away. At the door, he paused and looked back. Because I have not seen a blade like that in 200 years. And because the fools who laughed at you have forgotten something important. His yellow eyes gleamed. You are going to remind them. He disappeared through the door, leaving Rena alone with her ancient sword and 1,000 questions. She sheathed the blade and felt its familiar weight at her hip. Whatever happened next, she would face it the same way her ancestors had faced their challenges, with steel in her hand and fire in her heart. The memory came to Rena as she walked through the academy corridors that evening. 3 months ago, she had knelt in her grandmother's small house in Lagos while the old woman placed the katana in her hands. This blade has seen more than you can imagine, her grandmother had said. It was made by a master smith named Takeda Morimoto in the year 1902. It crossed oceans. It survived wars. It watched your great-great-grandfather bury his friends and mourn his enemies. Every scratch on this steel is a story. Every fold in the metal holds a memory. Rena had felt the weight of generations pressing down on her shoulders. Why me? She had asked. Why not one of the others? Her grandmother had smiled. Because you're the only one who asked that question. The blade does not belong to the strong. It belongs to the humble. Now Rena stood outside Instructor Merak's private quarters, that same blade hanging at her side. She knocked twice. The door opened. Merak stood in the entrance, still wearing his instructor uniform. Behind him, Rena could see walls covered with ancient weapons. Swords and spears and axes from 100 different worlds, all made of metal, all older than the energy weapons the cadets carried. Come in, Merak said, and closed the door. Rena entered. The room smelled like old leather and weapon oil. She recognized some of the blades on the walls from her studies. HFY scythes, corn tridents, Sarati crystal swords, all of them relics from an age before plasma and photons. You collect old weapons, Rena said. I remember old weapons, Merak corrected. There is a difference. The galaxy has forgotten what these meant. I have not. He gestured for her to sit. She chose a simple chair near the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. 200 years ago, Merak began, I visited your planet. It was a secret mission. We were observing your species, trying to decide if you were ready to join the galactic community. I spent 3 months watching humans. I saw your wars. I saw your cruelty. I almost recommended that we leave you alone forever. Rena tensed. She had heard this attitude from other aliens. Humans were violent. Humans were primitive. Humans were not worthy. But then I saw something else, Merak continued. His yellow eyes grew distant with memory. I was in a country called Japan. I witnessed 2 warriors face each other with blades like yours. They fought not for money or power. They fought for honor. And when one of them fell, the winner knelt beside him and wept. The old reptile turned to face her. In that moment, I understood something about your species. You do not just use your weapons. You love them. You mourn with them. You pass them to your children like sacred gifts. The blade becomes part of your soul. Rena touched the handle of her katana. My grandmother said something similar. Your grandmother was wise. Merak stood and walked to his collection. He pulled down a crystal sword that glowed faintly in the dim light. This was my father's blade, and his father's before him. For 12 generations, my family carried it into battle. Then energy weapons were invented. My people threw away their crystal swords and bought plasma cutters instead. They said the old ways were finished. He hung the sword back on the wall. I threw mine away too. I wanted to be modern. I wanted to be powerful. I won many battles with my new weapons. But I lost something more important. I lost the connection. I lost the soul. Rena understood. The other cadets do not know what they have lost. No, they think power comes from technology. They think a stronger weapon makes a stronger warrior. Merak shook his head slowly. They are wrong, and you're going to prove it. How? The old instructor reached into a cabinet and pulled out a training mat. He unrolled it on the floor between them. I'm going to teach you the old ways. The techniques that existed before energy weapons. The forms that modern warriors have forgotten. He drew his crystal sword. It sang as it left the scabbard. You have 3 months before the tournament. By the time we are finished, Your steel blade will be more dangerous than any plasma cutter in this academy. Rena stood and drew her katana. The steel gleamed beside the glowing crystal. Why are you helping me? She asked. You barely know me. Merak simidet. It was a sad smile, full of old regret, because I have been waiting 400 years for someone who understands. Someone who knows that the blade is not just a tool. It is a teacher. It is a friend. It is a piece of your ancestors living on in your hands. He raised his sword in salute. In 4 centuries, you are the first cadet I have met who carries that truth in her heart. Rena returned the salute. Then teach me, she said. I am ready to learn. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless burning. Inside the room, 2 warriors from different worlds began a journey that would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed about combat. The old ways were not dead. They were just waiting for someone brave enough to remember them. Every night, for 2 months, Rena trained with Instructor Merak in his private quarters. He taught her forms that had no names in any modern language. He showed her how to read an opponent's body before they moved. He drilled her in footwork patterns that made her feel like she was dancing instead of fighting. The plasma blade moves in straight lines, Merak explained during one session. It cuts through anything, so its users never learn subtlety. But steel must find gaps. Steel must flow around defenses. This is your advantage. Rena practiced until her arms burned and her legs shook. She practiced until the movements became automatic. She practiced until she dreamed of sword forms in her sleep. During the day, she attended regular classes with Squad 17. The other cadets still laughed at her, but the laughter was becoming uncertain. Word had spread that she spent her evenings with the legendary Instructor Merak. Nobody knew what they did together, and the mystery made people nervous. Pell, the small amphibian, became her closest friend. He sat with her during meals and helped her study for written exams. One evening, she began telling him about her blade and its history. Soon other cadets gathered to listen. Your people really passed weapons from parent to child? Asked a young Kethri female. Like family treasures. Yes, Rena said. We believe that the weapon carried part of its owner's spirit. When my great-great-grandfather held this blade, he left something of himself in the steel. Now when I hold it, I can feel him with me. The cadets exchanged glances. This was a strange idea to them. Their weapons were tools, nothing more. When a plasma blade broke, you bought a new one. The idea of mourning a weapon seemed absurd, but something in Rena's voice made them wonder if they were missing something important. Drell Savin watched these gatherings with growing anger. He had been the most popular cadet in the first-year class. Now attention was shifting to the human with the primitive blade. He could not allow this to continue. One evening, he cornered Rena in a corridor between classes. His 4 arms spread wide, blocking her path. In each hand, a weapon hummed with deadly energy. Fight me, he demanded. Right now. Show everyone what your ancient sword can do against real weapons. Rena kept her hand away from her blade. I will not draw my weapon in anger. Only in necessity. Coward. Drell stepped closer. You hide behind your rules and your rituals. You are nothing but a primitive pretending to be a warrior. He raised his plasma blade. The heat from it warmed Rena's face. I said, fight me. The blade swung toward her head. Another blade intercepted it. Crystal met plasma in a shower of sparks. Instructor Merak stood between them, his ancient sword holding back Drell's attack with impossible ease. That is enough, Merak said quietly. Drell stumbled backward. His compound eyes were wide with shock. No one had ever blocked his strike so easily. She insulted me, Drell said. She insulted all of us by bringing that piece of junk to this academy. She insulted no one. Merak sheathed his crystal sword. But you have insulted yourself. Attacking an unarmed opponent in a corridor? This is the behavior of a coward, not a warrior. You are on probation until the tournament. Drell's mandibles clicked with fury, but he said nothing. He turned and walked away, his 4 weapons still glowing in his hands. Merak watched him go, then turned to Rena. He will be dangerous in the tournament. His pride has been wounded. He will fight to kill. I know, Rena said. I'm not afraid. That night, Pell came to her with news. He had been researching human history in the Academy archives and found something interesting. Your planet was visited many times before first contact, he said. Different species came to observe you, and they all wrote the same thing in their reports. What did they write? Pell showed her the screen of his datapad. The words glowed in the dim light of her quarters. Humans form spiritual bonds with their tools unlike any other known species. This connection appears to enhance their combat effectiveness by an average of 40%. Further study recommended. Rena read the words twice. They studied us like animals, she said. Yes, but they also feared you. Look at the conclusion. She scrolled down and read the final line of the ancient report. Do not underestimate humans. Their weapons are primitive, but their spirits are not. Given time, they may become the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Rena set down the datapad. The tournament was 1 month away. Drell Savin wanted to destroy her. The entire academy expected her to fail, but her ancestors had faced worse odds with this same blade in their hands. She would not let them down. 2 weeks before the tournament, Rena noticed something wrong with Instructor Merak. His movements during training had become slower. His scales had lost their shine. Sometimes he paused in the middle of a lesson to catch his breath. You are sick, Rena said one evening. It was not a question. Merak lowered his crystal sword. For a moment, he looked every one of his 400 years. It is called the fading, he said, a disease that comes to old Sarati warriors. My body is failing. I have perhaps 6 months remaining. Rena felt cold. Is there no cure? None. I have known about this for 2 years. The Academy Board has been asking me to retire. They say I should spend my final days in comfort. He smiled bitterly, but I refused. I told them I would leave only when I found someone worthy to continue the old ways. Understanding dawned in Rena's mind. You have been waiting for me. Not you specifically, but someone like you. Someone who understands that the blade is more than metal and energy. Someone who knows the truth that the galaxy has forgotten. Merak sat down heavily on his training mat. When I read your application essay about your family sword, I knew I had to meet you. And when I saw the way you held that blade in the orientation hall, I knew my wait was over. Rena knelt beside him. I am not ready for this responsibility. No one ever is. Merak reached out and touched her katana with one scaled finger. But you carry the spirits of 4 generations in this steel. You have more help than you realize. That night, Rena could not sleep. She walked through the academy corridors, her blade at her side, thinking about everything Merak had told her. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a dying old warrior's legacy. She was fighting to prove that the old ways still mattered. The weight of it crushed down on her shoulders. She found herself outside Pell's quarters. She knocked before she could change her mind. The small amphibian opened the door, blinking with surprise. Rena? It is the middle of the night cycle. I know. I am sorry. I just needed to talk to someone. Pell let her in. His room was small and cluttered with books and datapads. He was studying to become a historian, not a warrior. The Academy had accepted him only because his species required military service from all citizens. Rena told him everything. About Merak's illness. About the responsibility she now carried. About her fear that she would fail and let everyone down. When she finished, Pell was quiet for a long moment. Do you know the history of my people? He finally asked. Rena shook her head. 300 years ago, the Quorum were conquered by a species with weapons far superior to ours. They destroyed our cities. They burned our libraries. They tried to erase our entire culture. Pell's large eyes glistened in the dim light. But we survived. Do you know how? How? We held onto our traditions, our songs, our stories. The conquerors could destroy our buildings and kill our warriors, but they could not touch the things we carried in our hearts. Pell reached out and touched the handle of her katana. You are not just carrying a blade, Rena. You are carrying proof that the soul matters more than the weapon. That is something no plasma cutter can ever destroy. Rena felt tears in her eyes. She blinked them away. Thank you, Pell. When the tournament, he said simply. Not for yourself. Not even for Merak. Win it for everyone who has ever been told that their traditions do not matter. Win it for everyone who has been laughed at for holding onto the old ways. She returned to her quarters and sat with her blade in her lap. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about her great-great-grandfather. She thought about the Japanese smith who had forged this steel over 100 years before humans knew that aliens existed. "I will not let you down," she whispered to the blade. "Any of you." The steel seemed to grow warm under her fingers, as if the spirits within were answering. 1 week later, Instructor Merak taught her one final technique. It was called the Death Strike. It required the warrior to drop all defenses and commit everything to a single attack. If it failed, the warrior would die. If it succeeded, nothing could stop it. "I learned this by watching that samurai duel 200 years ago," Merak said. "I have never used it. It requires something I lost long ago when I abandoned the old ways. But you have it. The willingness to give everything. The trust in something greater than yourself." Rena practiced the move until her body knew it by heart. The tournament began in 3 days. She was ready. The arena was the largest structure in the academy. It could hold 50,000 spectators, and on the day of the Crucible tournament, every seat was filled. Species from across the galaxy had come to watch the first-year cadets fight for their place in the academy. Giant screens showed close-ups of the combat floor. Announcers called out names and statistics in a dozen languages. Rena sat in the waiting area with the other cadets from Squad 17. Through the entrance tunnel, she could hear the roar of the crowd. Energy weapons hummed and crackled as matches began. Pell sat beside her, nervous but supportive. "You can do this," he said. "Just remember what Merak taught you." Rena nodded. Her hand rested on her katana. The steel felt alive under her palm. The first rounds passed quickly. Cadets fell one by one, their energy weapons flashing bright before going dark in defeat. Some matches lasted seconds. Others dragged on for long minutes of desperate combat. The losers were escorted from the arena, their academy careers finished. Drell Savin fought like a demon. His forearms moved in patterns too fast for most opponents to follow. He defeated 3 cadets without taking a single hit. After each victory, he looked toward the waiting area where Rena sat. His compound eyes burned with hatred. Then Rena's name was called. She walked through the tunnel and into the arena. The crowd fell silent when they saw her blade. Then the laughter began. It rolled through the stands like thunder. 50,000 voices mocking the human with a primitive weapon. Rena ignored them. She took her position on the combat floor and faced her first opponent, a Kethri female with twin plasma swords. The announcer called for the match to begin. The Kethri charged, both blades swinging. Rena did not try to block. She stepped to the side, letting the plasma swords pass through empty air. Her steel blade moved in a short arc, tapping the Kethri's wrist. The tap was gentle, barely a touch, but it hit a nerve cluster that Merak had taught her find. The Kethri's right arm went numb. Her plasma sword clattered to the floor. Before she could recover, Rena's blade was at her throat. The match was over in 4 seconds. The laughter in the crowd died. Confused murmurs replaced it that Rena's second opponent was more cautious. He was a large reptilian with a quantum-edged axe. He circled her slowly, looking for weaknesses. Rena let him circle. She watched his feet, reading his balance the way Merak had taught her. When he finally attacked, she was already moving. Her blade deflected his axe at an angle that should have been impossible. Steel should not be able to touch quantum edges. But Rena had learned that angle mattered more than material. She redirected his force instead of opposing at point 3 exchanges later. Her blade was at his throat. The crowd was silent now. Rena won her 3rd match, then her 4th. With each victory, the whispers in the stands grew louder. Some of the older spectators had begun to stand, watching with intense focus. They recognized the forms she was using. They had seen them before, long ago, before the galaxy forgot the old ways. Then the bracket narrowed to 2 names. Rena Okafor versus Drell Savin. The final match. Drell entered the arena with all 4 weapons drawn. Plasma blade, photon rapier, ion dagger, quantum cutter. They hummed and glowed around him like a cage of deadly light. Rena entered with her single steel blade. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. The primitive blade against the pride of modern warfare. This is the match everyone has been waiting for. Drell smiled with his mandibles. I'm going to enjoy this, human. I'm going to cut you apart piece by piece. Rena said nothing. She raised her blade in the opening stance Merak had taught her. The signal sounded. Drell attacked with all four arms at once. The weapons came from 4 different angles, each one capable of killing her instantly. Rena moved between them, her blade deflecting and redirecting with impossible precision. Sparks flew. The crowd gasped, but Drell was fast. Too fast. A plasma blade caught her shoulder, burning through her uniform and searing her skin. She stumbled. An ion dagger slashed across her thigh. Blood dripped onto the arena floor. She was losing. Drell pressed his advantage. His attacks came faster and faster. Rena blocked what she could, but more hits landed. Burns and cuts covered her arms. Her vision blurred with pain. She fell to her knees. The crowd roared. Drell raised all 4 weapons for the killing blow. And in that moment, Rena heard her grandmother's voice in her memory. The blade does not make the warrior. The warrior makes the blade. She understood. She had been fighting like an alien, trying to match Drell's speed and power. But she was not an alien. She was human. And humans did not fight with weapons alone. They fought with their souls. Rena rose. Her eyes changed. Something ancient and fierce burned behind them. Instructor Merak leaned forward in his seat, his old heart pounding. There it is, he whispered. Finally. Rena stopped thinking. She stopped planning. She stopped trying to be faster or stronger than Drell. Instead, she let go of everything except the blade in her hands and the spirits of everyone who had held it before her. Her great-great-grandfather was with her now. She could feel him, and his children, and their children. For generations of warriors standing behind her, their hands on her shoulders, their strength flowing into her arms. She attacked. The change was instant and terrifying. Rena moved in ways that made no sense to modern combat theory. Her blade did not follow predictable patterns. It flowed like water, struck like lightning, and vanished like smoke. Drell tried to track her movements, but his compound eyes could not keep up. His plasma blade met empty air. His photon rapier cut through shadows. His ion dagger stabbed at ghosts, and her steel blade found its targets to a cut across his upper right arm, a slice along his left leg, a tap to his third hand that made him drop his quantum cutter. Each strike was precise, surgical, impossible. The crowd had gone completely silent. 50,000 beings watched in stunned disbelief as a human with an ancient steel sword took apart the Academy's most promising cadet. Drell stumbled backward, fear replacing the hatred in his eyes. "What are you?" he demanded. "What is that blade?" Rena did not answer. She could not answer. She was not fully herself anymore. She was part of something larger, something older, something that the galaxy had forgotten but was now remembering. Drell attacked with desperate fury. All 3 of his remaining weapons swung at her in a final, devastating combination. It was his best move, the technique that had won him every match before this one that Rena saw the opening. The Death Strike. Merak had taught her that this move required everything. No defense, no retreat, complete commitment to a single moment of perfect violence. It cannot be faked or hesitated. Either she gave herself completely, or she would die. She gave herself completely. Her blade dropped low, leaving her entire upper body exposed. Drell's weapons raced toward her unprotected flesh. She should have died in that moment. Any sane calculation of speed and distance said she would be cut down before her strike could land. But this was not about calculation. This was about faith. Her katana rose in a single perfect arc. It passed through Drell's defenses like they did not exist. The point stopped exactly at his throat, pressing against his scales without breaking the skin. His 3 weapons stopped moving. They hung in the air, centimeters from her body, frozen by the realization of what had just happened. She had won. Rena held the position for 1 heartbeat. 2, 3, then she withdrew her blade, stepped back, and bowed. Drell's weapons clattered to the ground. All three of them. He stood there, shaking, unable to believe what had just happened. The arena remained silent for one more moment. Then Instructor Merak stood in the observation box. His old hands came together in a slow, rhythmic clap. It was an ancient Sarati gesture, one that had not been used in centuries. The highest honor a warrior could give to another warrior. Other old beings in the crowd recognized the gesture. They stood and joined the clapping. Then younger ones stood too, not knowing exactly what they were honoring, but feeling its importance in their bones. The sound built and built until it filled the arena like thunder. Drell looked at Rena. His mandibles moved, but no sound came out. Finally, he lowered his head in a bow. In Kethri culture, this was the highest acknowledgement of defeat. It meant she was not just as better in this match, but as better as a warrior. Rena returned the bow point 3 months later. Rena stood in a small ceremony room with Instructor Merak. He was weaker now. His scales faded to a dull gray, but his eyes still burned with the same fire she had seen on that first day. "I'm passing my position to you," Merak said. "You will teach the new cadets. You will show them what I showed you." "I am not ready," Rena said. "You were not ready on the day you arrived either. But you carried the truth in your heart, and that was enough." Merak reached up and removed an ancient crystal sword from the wall. His father's blade. 12 generations of his family had carried it. "Take this. Hang it beside your katana. Let them remind the galaxy together." Rena accepted the blade with trembling hands. "The old ways are not dead," Merak said. "They were just waiting for someone brave enough to remember them. Now go, teach, and never let them forget again." Years passed. Rena became the most famous instructor in the Academy's history. Students came from every corner of the galaxy to learn from the human with the Earthblade. Some brought energy weapons. Some brought ancient metal swords from their own cultures, pulled from dusty museums and family vaults. She taught them all, and on her wall hung 2 blades. One steel, one crystal, one from Earth, one from a dying species far across the stars. Together they told the story of a laughing crowd, a dying teacher, and the day the galaxy remembered what it truly meant to be a warrior. When students asked about those blades, she always told them the same thing. The blade does not make the warrior. The warrior makes the blade, and the warrior is made by all those who came before. The old ways lived on.